Thank you for attending, and those who are listening in and zooming in with us. Good to see everybody's faces. Turned out to be a beautiful day after cold last night. At this point in time, I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll have our roll call to determine our quorum. So, Ms. Thompson, if you would please call the roll.
Preble Acton. Here. Rhonda Allen.
Here.
Dr. Andrea Anthony. Dr. Andrea Anthony. Doug Bodery. Amber Brown.
Here.
Shay Crowell.
Happy to be here.
Holly Deering.
Here.
Alan Farley.
Present.
Mary Hickerson.
Here.
Lois Miller.
Here.
Alan McAdoo. Jeff Phillips.
Present.
Shantae Sherrill. Eric Tutobeni.
Will?
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The chair recognizes that we do have a quorum, and we can now conduct our business. Let me first read our opening statement, electronic meeting determination. This meeting of the Benefits Insurance Committee is being conducted electronically pursuant to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order 16. I would like to ask for a motion that conducting the meeting electronically is necessary to protect the public health, safety, welfare in light of the coronavirus. Is there a motion? Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any?
Second.
Mary, was that you on second?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For those who are zooming in, if you would help us out for keeping minutes, just say this is Mary Hickerson and Henderson or Jeff Phillips, and that way we can put it in the minutes. Thank you. If you would, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony. Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown.
Yes.
Shay Crowell. Shay
Yes.
Crowell. Thank you. Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Alan McAdoo. Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill. Shantae Sherrill. Eric Tutobeni.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, motion passes. Item number 2, members, on the agenda is our financials. Call on our Director of Risk Management, Mr. Elam, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor Ketron. For the 264 fund for the year, March numbers, revenue $9,118,799 compared to expenditures $8,106,399 with a plus in revenue of $1,012,401. Just below that, you'll see the enrollments was $6,323. The total for the year, calendar year, is $24,553,584 compared to expenditures at $20,575,646, and with a revenue of $3,978,119. And down towards the bottom, you will see for the fiscal year, the revenue total is $59,885,431, with expenditures at $64,357,978. Revenue less expenditures, a negative $4,472,578. For the 266 report, you will see for the month of March, for the fiscal year, you will see workers' comp, $9,819.91. OJI is $34,542.26 for a total of $44,362.17. Year-to-date, for the fiscal year, you will see for workers' comp, $70,115.16. OJI is $381,198.61, and the total for the fiscal year is $450,313.77. And that's a report for the 266 fund. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any questions for Mr. Elam?
This is Jeff Phillips. Move to approve the report, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion to approve the report. Any further discussion?
This is Mary Hickerson. I'll second that motion.
Got a second from Mary Hickerson. If you would, please, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Preble Acton. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony. Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown.
Yes.
Shay Crowell.
Yes.
Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. Members, I inadvertently skipped over approval of the minutes. Clerk reminded me, so if anyone read those minutes and found them in order, I would entertain a motion to accept from the previous meeting, those minutes.
This is Lois Miller.
Okay, I think Mary's lips moved first, and Lois, you got second. So we'll let Mary make the motion and Lois on the second. Any further discussion, additions, or deletions? Seeing none, call the roll.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony. Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown.
Yes.
Shay Crowell.
Yes.
Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We on number 3? Members, that brings us to number 3, the work comp OJI statistics. Mr. Good, if you would, please come forward. You're recognized. Thank you.
Sir.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
Fine, thank you, sir.
Good.
I'd like to report in the month of March, the county had as a whole 13 injuries, work-related, that required medical attention. That brought the county to a yearly total of 49. Of those 49, 37 of them are OSHA recordable, which consisted of 19 that are restricted days, 7 for year-to-date for lost time days, and 11 all others. As compared to the last 2 years, well, this year at this time we have 49. Last year at this time we had 47. In the previous year, 51, as you see from the graph there. As an estimate to the cost of those injuries, the incurred dollars year-to-date is $190,000 for this year compared to $128,000 last year and $104,000 the previous year. On the last page of your report, we broke those down across the county, those injuries. 8 of them are in the Board of Education, 5 are in the county, and the county's injuries are broken up across the Sheriff Department, EMS, and the Health Department.
Okay.
That's all I have at this time, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Good. Any questions for Mr. Good on the work comp OGI report? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the report? Have a
Mr.
motion.
Jeff Phillips, move to approve the report, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion and a second. Ms. Acton made the motion. Speaker Pro Tem Phillips on the second. Call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony. Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown.
Yes.
Shay Crowell. Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chapper.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Good. Next, we have Mr. Chappa. Chuck Chappa on our wellness report. Mr. Chappa, it's good to see you in person again. Yes, sir.
Thank you, everyone, and like I said, it is good to be back in person. So again, this month's for April, 10/1 to present on our wellness. So currently we're sitting at 983 annual physicals versus 815 last year. Biometric screenings, we're at 1,632 versus 1,286 last year. Health assessments, 491 versus 319. Mammograms, 557 versus 549. OBGYN screenings, 827 versus 819. Colon cancer screens were down a little bit, 187 versus 248. Cervical cancer screens, 845 versus 718. Prostate exam screenings, 286 versus 229. Flu shots were at 1,960 versus 1,864. And for those new goals that we added for the 2021 year, currently work with a health coach to achieve a health goal. We have 8 individuals that met that requirement. Work with a health coach to overcome a chronic health problem. We're at 5. And then complete 16 weeks of the OMADA Diabetes Prevention Program. We're sitting at 3. Currently, to date, goal met. Those are individuals that have met all 3 of their incentive points. 1,662, whereas last year we were at 1,354. So we're doing great across the board. And even for the colon cancer screens, we've got a plan for that as well. Going into some current and upcoming events that we've got planned. So we've got the mobile mammography scheduled. As you can see, the dates there, May 5th, July 23rd, August 24th, and October 15th. The one in May will be at Blackman Elementary, and then we'll find some other locations for the others. So those will be 9 to 4, and there'll be an online communication and screening link to schedule an appointment for those. So that'll be going out soon. Next thing we've got going on that we've been working really hard to get off the ground. So we're going to do a Cologuard campaign. Cologuard is a colon cancer screening, a take-home version that can be sent. It's eligible for those 45 and up. So in conjunction with the St. Thomas team and the Midpoint clinics, we're going to run a 3-month Cologuard campaign for that eligible population. We're finalizing the communication pieces now. They'll be going out here in the next couple weeks. And so we'll be pushing those communications. That date, the dates of that campaign will start May 17th and it'll run till July 30th. And it'll be conducted during regular clinic hours. They'll be able to come in, be screened, and then provided with a prescription for that to take home and send in. The results will be sent to the clinic, and those results will be viewable via their web portal. Last thing we've got going on for this that actually started on the 19th, we started up our next Q2 Wellness Challenge. So it is a step/walking challenge. We've currently got 80 teams signed up, 4 teams a person, so you're looking at 320 people. Michaela from St. Thomas is spearheading that one. She's doing a great job. And I think most of the risk management team actually put together a team as well. So that's in full swing. So that will conclude my report if there are no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Any questions on the report? Thank you so much for the report. Midpoint Report, Ms. O'Neill, are you with us? There you are. Ms. O'Neill, you recognized.
Thank you. Can you see my report?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Alrighty. So we'll start with our visit analysis. In March, the health center saw 782 visits. Of that, 576 were unique members seen. New Salem saw 315 of them, Stewart's Creek 260, and Walter Hill 207. In the unique member type by health center, we saw 73 children, 592 employees, and 172 spouse. 150 members had more than one visit in the month of March. 2 members had 8 visits. 1 member had 5 visits. 7 members had 4 visits, and then 140 members had 2 to 3 visits. Of those 364 visits, of the total visits we had, 364 visits were for established patient visits, which, as I've explained before, could be anything from a med refill to the flu. And we had 95 annual visits and 55 dietitian visits, as well as 159 telehealth visits. So really a pretty good month there, especially for the annual exams. Mondays were the busiest day for the month of March. There were 5 Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays for the month of March. We did 175 virtual appointments in the month of March, and Walter Hill continues to have the highest average of virtual utilization. Again, that makes sense for Walter Hill with its space constraints, only having the 1 exam room. Of those virtual visits, just over 70% were done by the choice of the members, meaning that they could have chosen to come into the clinic or be seen virtually, and they chose to be seen virtually. And just under 30% were seen based on need, meaning that their symptoms would preclude them from walking into our doors because we had concerns about COVID. And if you look, you'll see that New Salem did just under 12% of their visits virtually, Stewart's Creek just over 19% of their visits virtually, whereas Walter Hill did just over 42.5% of their visits virtually. And a virtual visit is done just as if you had an in-office appointment. We do the full history, we talk to them about their symptoms, we do prescriptions, all of those things. It's not just a, hey, how you doing kind of visit. This is kind of a breakdown of the virtual appointment trending summary by month since we've opened. We tend to hover right about 75% in office and 25% virtually, though it's varied a little bit throughout, but that seems to be about the trend that's going through the clinics. Our referrals by specialty, we did 85 referrals in the month of March. Gastroenterology in the month of March was our highest referral source at 17, followed by sleep medicine, our dietitian, and dermatology, as well as neurology. In our financials, in March we had 576 unique members, a total operating cost of $132,013.23 for a PEPM of $21. And our top 10 diagnosis codes, our general adult medical exam, which is that annual physical, was our highest utilized diagnosis code at just over, or at 21.5%. And then followed by hypertension at just over 10%, and then anxiety, type 2 diabetes, and immunization. In March, just over 70% of our visits were female members seen. The age range of 40 to 49 of the female population and the age range of 50 to 59 of the male population were the highest numbers seen in that month. In March, our female members' highest percent of BMI was in the obese range, and in March, our male members' highest percent of BMI was in the overweight range. And that concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Ms. O'Neill. Any questions for Ms. O'Neill on her report?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Sure.
We spoke at one.
recognized.
Thank you. We spoke at one point about we were not able to offer the COVID vaccines because of the refrigeration temperatures that they needed to stay at. Has that changed at all, or is that anything that we're going to look at offering at our clinics? Because I know there are the Johnson & Johnson, I think, can be stored at a more appropriate temperature, but again, I don't know where we're at on offering that either. So I was just curious to know if that's anything we're going to begin offering at the clinics.
Ms. O'Neill, any comments?
So at this time, we are not offering it as of today, but we are looking at options for the county, and we are willing to be creative in how we can make that happen. But I know that there was a hold on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, so that's made things a little more difficult as well. Certainly, though, we do have some vaccine options that aren't necessarily through the Midpoint Clinic if people don't want to wait for us to kind of get through that process, and we can certainly set that up for them, and they can call our clinics and we can help them with that process if they would like to be vaccinated.
Amber, this is Eddie. On the vials that the vaccinations are done, aren't they like in multiples of 10? There's no single vaccination that you can pull from. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Could you ask that again?
On the vials where you have to prepare for the vaccinations, do they not come, do they come in like numbers of 10?
Correct, yeah. So if we do any sort of vaccination, it would have to be a requirement of 10 people, so there wouldn't be any loss. We couldn't do just single individual vaccinations. They all have to be done at the same time frame.
Other question, Ms. Allen?
The only thing I was going to say is that since it looks like this may have to become an annual vaccine, then it's something that I would like for us to sort of pre-plan for going forward, whether it's a booster or initial vaccination or whatever. But I think it would be terrific if we could offer that through these clinics in some way.
Yeah, that's a real good point there. Some folks you hear talk about, Dr. Fauci, et cetera, they're talking 6 months from now, booster. So that would well come into this coming year.
Yes, and I think we could do it possibly like the flu drive-throughs, or have a day to where the clinic is one of the clinics may be open. Yes, and then maybe do some scheduling so to make sure that we're not wasting any of those vaccines. And I would anticipate that even in the future, you might get down to single-dose vials where you can get the shot individually instead of, because the biggest thing now is you don't want to waste any shots. So, and that's one of the hurdles we ran into, not only refrigeration, but trying to schedule to get enough people.
Other questions for Ms. O'Neill? Hearing or seeing none. Ms. O'Neill, thank you so much for your report. Next, we have our property and casualty renewal numbers that Mr. David Patterson with Assured Partners from Brentwood will be sharing with us what our renewal numbers are, so we can appropriately plug those into our budget over the course of the next couple of weeks. Chairman Allen, we need these soon. So, David, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mayor Ketron. Committee, in your information that I think Susan put out, there's a lot. I've included a lot of detail. I don't intend to go over all of this unless you guys want to. I would like to hit some highlights. Generally, Mr. Elam and I started this process about mid-December, I would say, with an eye on coming up with some options for the committee to evaluate on the property and casualty side. So the first pages is my recommendation on what the county should consider doing for the property and casualty for the next fiscal year. So the first couple of pages are property. I want to point out that our property values have increased about 2%. We've got a $500 million per occurrence limit, meaning any one tornado or, fire or whatever, any kind of covered cause of loss, the most the carrier is going to pay is $500 million, which would cover a lot. Our total property value is almost $1.6 billion in total value. We have a $10 million flood, $10 million earthquake limit, and our auto physical damage increased about 9% total.
May I jump in? I'm sorry, and just ask this
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
Follow-up question on that. Is that $500,000 per building or per event?
500 million, I'm sorry. Did I say 500,000? I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, I think you did, but I'm just saying, I just want to know, are we covering by each school? If I have 3 schools that get hit, is that 500 per building, or is that 500 for the event?
For the event. So it's an occurrence limit.
An occurrence.
Okay, so if it hits multiple
an occurrence
schools.
would be like,
Wilson County. I know what you're thinking.
Right.
yeah, I mean, a tornado comes through there and takes out Blackman, and, there's 3 schools, and it keeps on going. So the total would be, the company will pay any one event occurrence is $500 million.
So an hour later, another tornado comes through. That's a different occurrence.
Different event, right, different occurrence, correct. Yeah, so one fire, one tornado, that kind of
And the next day you get the flood. That's a different occurrence.
And then the rain comes,
And
right,
rain.
right, correct.
And David, you might point out, starting July 1, anything that adds on, this premium remains the same.
Right.
Correct. So one of the great things
25
about the
million.
Public Entity Property Program, which we're a member of, it's the largest property placement in the world. It's just for public entities, the property insurance for public entities all across the country. If there's a $25 million or less endorsement request, we add a school, it's $22 million. They don't even charge us premium. So that's pretty nice. I think
For that year.
Yeah, it gets...
Whatever occurs within that year.
Correct.
Doesn't change the premium. Now, next year it'll occur.
It'll be on there.
And that would be like Plainview Elementary. When it
Got a
comes
new
on,
school
the
coming
additions
on, I
that
think, in
come on.
August, which would be after the effective date. So I think that school's 20 million, roughly. No premium charge, which is pretty cool.
Which is just the building. It's
Yeah.
not roads and all that other stuff that's in there.
That's the property. Any other questions about the property? And we can move on to the casualty, which is page 3.
I have a question. This is Mary.
Mary, you're recognized.
So making sure I'm understanding this right, these numbers that reflect what we currently insure does not include the Plainview Elementary school site or any building in that area of that progress. This does not have that insured yet.
David, do we have a builder's risk on that, or has that already been added on?
DC, so the general
contractor's
the general
carrying it.
contractor has a builder's risk on that location. So while it's under construction, it's covered by the builder's risk. So when the GC, when you get the final certificate of occupancy, then we'll take it off of the builder's risk and put it on this policy. And my understanding, that's going to happen somewhere around the 1st of August.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
But our policy goes into effect, our renewal
July
is
1st.
July 1, so at that point in time, we'll pick up, and David will add that on for 11 months.
Correct.
During that period of time.
It'll have coverage.
Okay, so even though we would have people in the building prior to August, so, I mean, if school's opening the first week of August, I'm assuming that third or fourth week of July, we've got folks into the building. So all of that is covered under the current builder, and it would go into effect August 1st on covering the actual property and contents.
It's all about the CFO, isn't it, David?
Correct. So while they're delivering the furniture and they're doing all the stuff, and they're going to have employees in there getting their classrooms ready and all that's going to be covered under the current policy and the policy that renews July 1. When the GC actually turns the building over to the county, and we got our certificate of occupancy, then I will take it off of the builder's risk and add it to the new property policy. Am I answering your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Sorry to be complicated. I just want to make sure that we got everybody covered, because I know folks are in working in a building before it's actually turned over that we can start bringing children in.
Correct. It'll be a seamless transition. Okay, so on the casualty, we actually increased as I mentioned a moment ago on the property, we actually increased, so the auto physical damage is covered really under two policies. Under the casualty policy, the first $1 million of auto physical damage is covered with the auto liability. The excess auto physical damage is covered under the property policy. So we increased those values about 9%. The county has more vehicles, new vehicles cost more money. The actual count itself of vehicles is up about 5%. So generally, these coverages are exactly the same next year as they are this year in terms of limits. We've got a $5 million limit of liability for general liability, harassment, sexual misconduct, public officials liability. All those are $5 million limits with a $350,000 self-insured retention or deductible is a way to think of that. That policy also includes crime with a $475,000 limit with a $25,000 deductible. The auto physical damage deductible is $25,000. So any one car wreck, we're basically self-insuring anything less than $25,000. But if we total a fire truck, for example, those things cost $600,000-$700,000, I think, these days, new. So that's not a check the county wants to write. That would be an insurance claim, and we'd have a $25,000 deductible. So overall, the county's grown. So we've got generally 5 to 9% more exposure base being higher, whether that's payroll or property values or auto counts, those kinds of things, year over year.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on that.
Yes.
We just
Yes, ma'am.
recently, this past year, went to a leasing structure with vehicles as opposed to ownership. Does that in any way impact how we insure those vehicles?
The only change I had to make, no. The answer is no. The only change I had to make was to add stopgap because the value of the vehicle between what its present value is and what the lease value is often different because of depreciation.
Yeah, in that case, one of Preble's cars may have high mileage on it, even though it's a brand new vehicle. It's got higher mileage and it's depreciated less. So there may be that gap that's created. So David was able to pick that up.
Yeah, your depreciated value and what's left of the lease
Correct.
Might not be the same number, but generally, no, it doesn't matter.
So I've got a couple of questions, David. Had a meeting with Mrs. Hickers, Sonia Stevenson yesterday, our HR director, and under our general liability, under our law enforcement liability, we have sublimits of $350,000 for sexual abuse. For public officials, we have $350 limit also for sexual abuse, but she informed me that it was nowhere in our handbook that we have a policy on sexual abuse. So we'll be forwarding, getting with our attorney and getting that wording formulated so it can go into our employee handbook.
Correct. So
in order, that needs to be in our handbook to where this can come in right behind and protect us up to that limit.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that we kind of discovered, I guess, through this process when Ed and I were going through it was there's not really the county doesn't really have a written policy against abuse and harassment and those kinds of things, which, we got to kind of have these days. So that's, I think, what Mayor Ketchum's referring to. And it just needs to be in the handbook. So that...
The schools have one.
The school has one.
Yes.
Yeah, I think County General does not. I'm not sure about
County
the
General
Sheriff's
does.
Department, but, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just kind of need
And
to be consistent across the whole county, kind of have the same policies in every department.
And the insurance is called a SAM policy, sexual abuse and molestation.
Sexual abuse and
policy.
molestation,
So
SAM, right.
If you see SAM policy,
Yeah,
that's
SAM,
what,
that's-
if you hear somebody talking about a SAM policy, that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, insurance acronyms. We love our acronyms in the insurance business.
My next question, David, is...
I hate them.
Do you feel that we're adequately covered? My biggest fear is from cyber attack and ransomware. In today's society in talking to our director of IT, the number of concentrated hits. We had one just a week or so ago that we were attacked. Our IT system was attacked, and it was very targeted. Like mine and several department heads were targeted, and not general population. So it was more concerning for Mr. York for him to see that attack that hit us. I just want to make sure that you feel like in comparison to other entities our size that we're properly covered there for cyber extortion, ransomware, business interruption, data recovery, that type of stuff.
That's a great segue, thank you, because the very next page is cyber liability. To answer your question, Mayor Ketchum, yes, I think generally, of course, it's hard for me to say, yeah, it's covered. I mean, if you tell me how big of a claim you're going to have, I'll tell you how much insurance to buy, right? So, but generally speaking, for a county your size, and cyber liability is a coverage that we just added a couple of years ago. Prior to our relationship, you guys didn't have cyber liability, which is kind of mind-boggling. And it's the most fluid of all of these numbers. Ed and I have been really gnashing our teeth over this particular coverage because, to your point, Mayor Ketchum, claims are going crazy on the cyber liability side. We used to worry about people hacking the system and stealing personally identifiable data, right, and selling that on the black market. That is not what the bad guys do anymore. Now they send you, a fictitious email with a link, and you click on it, and they own your data, and they extort money out of you to get the data back. To that end, I do think that $2 million is a reasonable number.
Reasonable.
Yeah, it's a reasonable number.
And does our current policy, does it pay in Bitcoin?
It will.
Okay.
It will. And the carrier will negotiate on your behalf. Your two biggest costs are going to be forensics. Number one, you got to figure out what went wrong, how'd they get in, and fix it. That's first-party costs. And, hopefully we won't have to, but at some point, the decision's made, do we pay the bad guys?
Yeah.
And hope we get our data back.
A lot of the attacks are, what I've been reading about it, a lot of the attacks are coming from Eastern European countries, and they're demanding payment in Bitcoin, which is non-traceable through the system. I just want to make sure we're covered there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not really a question of if you're going to get a claim. It's a question of when you're going to get a claim.
Yeah, it's
everybody. I mean, from small businesses to large. I mean, you read about it in the papers every day. So it is definitely a problem. And where I was going a minute ago with that thought is that premium is my very best guess because the marketplace is so fluid, and I can't get a solid number for a July 1 date out of a carrier today. It's changing that rapidly. So $9,800 is my best guess on what it's going to cost. I think it's a good guess, but I'm not positive it's a good guess. So I might need a little wiggle room on that one.
Mayor Ketchum.
I've got Ms. Allen first. Go ahead.
Okay. Is there any sort of responsibility that we have as a county to make sure that we've protected ourselves? Like, are there certain protocols or things that they're going to look at us to say, you didn't take reasonable steps? So is there anything we need to be examining internally to make sure that we've taken all the reasonable steps so that there wouldn't be an excluded claim?
Right, so no, there's no warranties under the policy. We're not warranting that we're doing everything just right. So the answer to that is no. That said, actually I'm going through the process right now with IT. We just met with them last week, and I mean, it was really a good meeting, and we kind of really did a deep dive into what the Sheriff's Department's doing and what BOE's doing and what County General's doing, and we're in the process of gathering all that data, because my understanding is it's kind of fragmented right now. The Sheriff's Department's got their own system, and BOE's got their own system, and the county's got their own system, and I think there's even a Deeds, was it Deeds, that has their own separate system, so it's...
Registered Deeds.
Yeah. So it's a little fragmented, which is fine. I mean, it's not a problem as long as we're all pretty much doing the same things. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same system, but we all kind of need to have, and I think that's in process right now.
Well, I'm just sure this is like anything else where you always have best practices
Correct.
in an industry.
Correct.
And so, as government, we try so hard to be frugal that I don't want to be frugal to the point, that we're being irresponsible. So I just want to make sure that we know what the best practices are and that we are implementing those across the board.
Well, I can tell you that Director of OIT, he knows what he's doing. So he's in the process of getting all that data together from BOE and Sheriff and all that, and we're going to kind of consolidate that and and make sure that everybody's on the same plane. But yeah, I think we're fine.
Was that you, Mary, that was going to ask a question? Someone was.
No, it was me, Sonia.
Okay, Sonia.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify that the county does have a sexual harassment policy already. We've had that for as long as I've been here. And on the sexual abuse, as Mayor said, that we have sent that up to the attorney for him to review. But I did, whenever you said that each of the agencies would have to be using the same policy, that's going to be probably an issue because the Board of Ed has their own sexual harassment and sexual abuse policy. We will have ours after the commission, after the attorney approves ours. I will send that over to the sheriff's office because he has his own handbook. The Register of Deeds has her own handbook. The property assessor has his own handbook. So, I don't know that all of us will have the same exact policy. Is that going to be an issue?
No. So that was kind of my point a moment ago. It doesn't have to be exactly the same because, BEOE's got a very different exposure to sexual issues than County General, than the Sheriff's Department, and so on. But what we're looking for, Sonia, is just, that every department's kind of got the basics covered in their policies. It doesn't have to be, the same rules and regulations that BOE has because, we're not dealing with children in other departments.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I thought I heard you say that they needed to be the same, and I just wanted to
It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but the basics have to all be there. And I think we're working in the right direction. I think what you're doing is exactly right.
Ms. Allen?
We're seeing a lot in the news right now about settlements with families over, wrongful conditions or treatment of citizens. Would that be covered under one of these policies, or is that covered elsewhere in our coverage?
It's covered under the general liability under the law. Well, like what you mostly hear about, unfortunately, these days is law enforcement issues, where there's some wrong actor did something, whether it was right or not, doesn't matter, I don't think. But that would be covered under this policy, under the law enforcement legal.
David, I believe the school board just, Ms. Allen, being chairman of Health and Ed, didn't we just renew the contract with the school bus drivers? And it's a new contract. You may want to get your hands on that.
Oh, that's the old one. Mm-hmm.
Compared to the old one, it's been several years, and so they gave a new contract and approved it. So that's something you need to look at because it is they're contracted school bus drivers with the county, and I don't know what specifics are in there, but you need to make sure that we, the county, are covered.
Right, correct. I'll get that from.
It can probably get that. He can reach out to our Mr. Bodery, if you're still on there. If you could send that to Ed, he'll get it to David.
Yes, sir, I will.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Anything else, Dave?
Well, the next page is the dental professional, and I'm not sure we're going to have this next year. I think there's no dentist right now in the health department, and there's some consideration of whether they're going to hire one or who's going to insure it or what. But Ed and I discussed it, and we thought, it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, so we just left it in there for now. But this may not renew July 1.
For budgeting purposes.
For budgeting purposes, correct.
We're not going to take the policy out until if they hire a dentist.
Unless we have a dentist, then obviously we don't need a dental professional liability. The next slide is the firefighters for the employed and volunteer firefighters, just for the county, not for the VFDs, but just the county employees and county volunteers. This policy covers them. It's an accidental death and injury policy. About a $50,000 limit.
Well, and we just recently, through public safety, we have new contracts with each one of the volunteer fire departments. Eagleville's the only one, and we've asked legal to treat their language a little bit different because they are not a volunteer, they're a city. But even though we, at times, depends on when they want to be treated as a volunteer and when they want to be treated as a city, so the language's got to be a little bit different. I believe we have those, Ed, those contracts we should be able to get.
We do. David's
Got 'em.
reviewed them.
Got 'em. That's
Even the
wonderful.
latest one that's gone from Eagleville that's not signed yet.
Perfect. Thank
So,
you.
yeah, so Nick and I.
Yeah, just this week, Nick sent that
Yeah,
to me.
Nick and I just kind of revised some of the language on the Eagleville contract, sir. So that, I think that's probably pretty close to being done.
Yeah, Mr. Turner was, all of a sudden, he got donned with a black robe by order of the governor, and so he was their Eagleville's attorney, and so his, whatever he was working on for Eagleville kind of was stagnated for a little while, so he could get his robe fitted, as new judge. So, okay.
I guess I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I thought we did offer some coverage to the volunteers. I thought that was something that we had added, was offering some sort of benefit for the volunteer firefighters.
So this has been an ongoing conversation with the VFDs. And at the end of it, their independence won out. They didn't want our help. Yeah. So the VFDs all do their own thing. They have their own insurance policies. They insure the county's equipment, they insure the county's buildings, and it's all in this new contract.
I made that offer to them. I went out and talked to each one of them personally, and they chose to stay with what they had through VIS, I believe is the company they're written through. We just needed language to make sure that the equipment that we give to them, that we have a clear understanding whose policy is primary and whose is secondary.
So the result of all that, it's actually a really good contract that we have now.
it's
The
been
contract before was kind of loose, really didn't clearly define.
A lot of gray area about
Yeah.
who's going to pay for what.
Who's gonna pay for
and so
what, yeah.
We got that hammered out.
So the new contract is pretty solid. The county's added as additional insured under all the VFD's policies, so if they run over a busload of kids or whatever, they get sued, county gets sued, everybody gets sued, they're going to defend us. So it worked out okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question on that. This is Mary.
Mary?
Okay, so along with Miss Allen, so basically I'm looking at this sheet where you're speaking about the volunteer firefighters accident coverage. So technically, it's not the volunteer firefighters we're covering. We're actually covering the firefighters that receive pay as being a Rutherford County fireman instead of the volunteers. So should this coverage, this title on this sheet here where you're talking about the volunteer firefighters accident coverage, should that be changed to employed firefighters by Rutherford County? Because at first look at this, I assumed this was covering all of our firemen, the Rutherford County paid ones and our volunteers.
That's correct. I probably should put, employee and volunteer on there. I'll revise that. But the policy does cover both employees of the fire department and rescue squad and volunteers. So for a little more clarification, if they're employees of the county, they're covered under the OJI coverage as well. So this would be supplemental to the OJI. But if they're volunteers, they're not covered by the OJI, they're not employees. So this would be the only coverage that they have as volunteers.
This, if I understand correct me if I'm wrong, the volunteers for the Rutherford County
Correct.
Fire Department.
Larry's volunteers.
Larry's
Larry's
for Rutherford
volunteers.
County. And that's what's a little confusing is because
Larry had
those people
volunteers.
that came in and volunteered for Rutherford County Fire Department, they didn't have any coverage through the volunteer fire departments, Kittrell, Christiana.
Correct.
So there was a gap
Correct.
for those volunteers. So that's what this coverage is for those volunteers with Rutherford County Fire Department.
Correct. Not Kittrell, not Las Casas. None of those guys have anything to do with this policy. This is strictly the county's career and volunteer firefighters.
Which is very close to what the volunteers department, you've looked at all the policies.
I've done an analysis of all the VFD's policies as well, and they're great, they're fine. This policy is actually equal to or better than most of. I think
it's very close.
There's only one VFD that has equal limits to ours. Ours is better than the other 3 of the 4.
Okay, so Rutherford County has paid firefighters, Rutherford County has volunteer firefighters.
Correct.
And then we have the volunteer firefighters like Las Casas, Kittrell, and Anvil, which is totally separate.
Correct.
So there's 3 groups of firefighters covering Rutherford County.
Correct.
Correct. We're just covering,
Okay.
correct.
To follow up to Mary's point, it is very confusing. We probably need to figure out a way to identify those groups distinctly, just so that going forward, we don't have to keep figuring out who's on first.
We can just get with Larry and figure out. I think
We need acronyms. We need an acronym.
I can
For the
come up with an
different groups?
acronym. I sure can.
Please don't, please
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, something like Sam, right?
Yeah. I think the wording is Rutherford County Fire Department.
Department.
Well,
like
it's actually
volunteers.
emergency and rescue.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
let's
big,
go
it's actually a
down
pretty
that road.
long name. I didn't include all that in here. It's pretty involved.
We'll get it worked out where it's identifiable.
But just for purposes of conversation, we are only covering employees in the fire department for Rutherford County employees, and Rutherford County volunteers. If they're Las Casas or Kittrell or one of the other ones, Eagleville, any of those guys, if they volunteer for those departments, they are not covered under this policy.
I mean, I think even if you just put an asterisk and a footnote at the bottom of the page saying which ones are excluded, I think that's going to answer this issue. Because if nothing else, it will prompt somebody to say, well, then what about them?
Okay,
And then we can
that would be
talk
simple.
about that. Yeah.
I can do that. And I'll add employees up here with volunteers. Okay, next slide is we have a financial guarantee bond that we're required to post from back in the day when we had a work comp program. There are still, I think, Ed, 10 open claims roughly from 10 years ago. So the state requires us to maintain a $500,000 guarantee bond for those open claims. And that's just, we have to keep those until all the claims are finally closed out. And that may be a few more years on some of them, I think.
Yes.
Next page is what you guys pay me. And then finally, on the last page, is the option that we came up with. The insurance industry right now is probably going into the 3rd year of a hard market. It started with automobile. Then property followed it, and now excess liability has gone off the rails. So we are definitely moving into a hard market. So Ed and I did an exhaustive search. I mean, I left no stone unturned. And really the only competitive quote that I came up with compared to what we have now is the Trident option. It's a little bit less premium, about $37,000, $38,000 less premium than we're paying right now. But the county has to take a lot more risk. So a moment ago, we were talking about on the general liability, we have a $350,000 retention. That's our deductible, if you will. So we pay the first $350,000 of any claim. Well, under the Trident option, we're going to have to pay the first $500,000 of any claim. So it's $150,000 more risk per claim for $37,000 of savings. So to me, I mean, I'm not the guy that has to write the check, but to me that does not seem like a good deal. And on the auto physical damage, right now, a moment ago we were talking about the auto physical damage with a $25,000 deductible. Well, now it's going to be $100,000. So if we wreck one fire truck or one dump truck or one vacuum truck or anything, that savings is gone.
That would be one high-speed chase.
That would be
right, Preble. One high-speed chase,
no.
And that savings is wiped out.
Yeah, somebody hitting us. It happens more frequently that people hit us than we hit them. But yes, to that point, one claim would wipe out $37,000 of savings.
We're glad we got 9 new Durangos in yesterday, right? We were running out of cars. People hitting us.
They do hit us. They do.
I don't know why. They just
can't see the lights.
I see those lights. No,
they can't see the lights. I don't know. So that's pretty much.
Other questions on the property and casualty? For Mr. Patterson. Any questions?
This is Mary, Chairman Ketron.
Yes?
So are we to the point that these are numbers enough that Ed is needing a motion to approve these?
Yes, ma'am.
Or, okay, I'll go ahead and make that motion, and in that motion, let's not go with the $37,000 less. Let's leave it where we're at on all of our liability and physical damages, all of our coverage that we've got, leave it as is right now the way we've got it.
Heard the motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, this is Jeff Phillips. I'll second that motion.
Second on the motion by Mr. Speaker Pro Tem Phillips, motion by Mary Hickerson. Any further discussion?
I have one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Allen.
There's a footnote at the bottom that says premiums above exclude TRIA per expiring terms. What does that mean?
TRIA is the Terrorism Act, the Federal Terrorism Act. So historically, we have always excluded terrorism from our policies. Since 9/11, there's been no certified acts of terrorism. The Boston bombing at the race, obviously it was a terrorist attack. That was not a certified act of terrorism. So terrorism only comes into play if the federal government says this was a certified act of terrorism. So,
but also the federal government made it mandatory all insurance companies have to offer it.
Correct.
So we have always excluded it.
Okay, I guess that's my question is, I didn't know if we're covered or not, because I know, like, for example, there was a lot of debate in Nashville when that bombing happened. Everybody was holding their breath about whether or not that was going to be terrorism because it hinged whether or not insurance was going to cover. So if we have domestic terrorism, whatever, if we have a qualified terrorism event, are we covered?
If we waive terrorism coverage and the federal government says this was a terrorist act, no, we are not covered.
So not just federal government, that was just local government.
The federal government has to make the determination that it's a terrorist act. If it's not a terrorist act, then yeah, it's just like a regular claim. It's an explosion or whatever. So they've never done. See, and the reason why they don't do that is because the federal government insures the terrorism coverage. So if they declare it a terrorist act, then they get to pay for the claim instead of the insurance company. That's why none of it ever is certified as a terrorist act.
There was a real fine line on all those businesses down on 2nd Avenue. I don't know if you had any insured, David, or not, but I talked to some friends who did, and it was touch and go about, there was such a fine line because on just about every policy, riot, rioting, strike, civil commotion, civil unrest, those type of acts, if you have a riot and people come in and break your windows and stuff, that is excluded by all policies.
Not covered by the policy.
So
civil unrest is not covered.
So there was a fine line whether that was a terrorist act or whether this guy just, could they squeeze it under, the claims adjuster squeeze it under fire or explosion, So, but we have traditionally excluded terrorism, right?
Yeah, we have traditionally excluded it.
Okay. Any further questions?
Yes, this is Eric Tutabene. I got a quick question. You said that the claim deductible was how much? $350,000?
For the casualty, yeah. For general liability and abuse, professional liability, $350,000.
What I was wondering is, because you talked about one that had a lower, annual premium, but it raised the deductible. Was there one option that you maybe came across that has slightly higher premium but dramatically lowered the deductible? For example, lowered that to $150,000 or $200,000?
No. Lower isn't available in the marketplace.
Okay.
At any premium.
That answer your question? Okay, any other questions?
That's it. That's all I needed to know. I was just curious.
Okay, all right, great. Other questions for David? Well, we have a motion and a second. Any further questions? Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony.
Yes.
Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown.
Yes.
Shay Crowell.
Yes.
Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you so much, David. Thank you for all your help. Well, that concludes our warm-up act, and we'll move into our main event. Jake?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We ready?
The main event ring is all yours.
Need to stand up and stretch a little bit. We're already at an hour. Everybody okay? All right, I'll try to keep it concise, which is always hard for me, but...
Yes, sir. Just the facts.
Just to stick to the facts. It's always good to throw up a bunch of numbers there.
Yes, sir.
We're doing first, but mainly I just want to thank everybody.
Yeah, if you can get closer to the mic,
Okay.
please pull that over. There you go.
Couple screens. Is that better? Can you hear me better there?
Yeah, lean into the mic.
Is it first? Okay.
No.
It's on. Okay. First, I just wanted to thank the committee, the mayor, Ed and his team. I mean, I was looking back as I was kind of writing my notes down of, we've taken up a lot of your time over the last year. It seems like we've been up here a lot, making some pretty big decisions. So I know you guys have, from all the way back to the on-site clinic, which is hard to remember, that was less than a year ago, to Ed and his team's implementing a whole new bin admin system that you'll see here for open enrollment. It's hard to even believe the medical, dental, vision, pharmacy, stop loss, RFPs behind us a little bit. So a lot of big decisions you all have made. So I appreciate you working with us on that. Also like the fact that the last few months we've been able to pretty much have a format to come to these meetings with a little bit of information, let you have some time to think about those things, and then come back to the next meeting with some more. So excited today to kind of get to the spot where we are going to share contributions and rates. Over the last few months, we've, due to COVID, accelerating a lot of decisions. Last meeting, we had to make some tough decisions, which we'll recap here in a minute, with the goal of trying to get below a 5% increase, which we've successfully been able to do. Due to all the constraints that we've had. The school board, they're growing more schools, looking at the state plans, giving us some great ideas on how we may want to make some changes there. So a lot of things have allowed us to really get to a place today where we've been talking about these things for a couple years and really look at how we could implement these things for 1/1 this year. If you'll think back, before we look at the rates, one thing that we did talk about, at one point we showed a conservative, moderate, aggressive projection where we had anywhere from a 12% increase down to a 4%. If I'm not mistaken, Lisa, we landed on at one point around a 10% budget number, just as a placeholder for now. Is that about right? Which represented an increase of about $7.8 million. And then over the course of the last few months, we've been really trying to figure out how we can make the plan changes, really get aggressive with the projections. Last meeting we shared, due to some of the plan changes, which we can go back through here in a minute, we were able to get the overall increase down to 3.6, 3.7%, which represented about a $2.8 million increase. So from the 10 to the 3.6, it's right around a $5 million difference. Assuming we continue that path today. So that's a positive. I think that'll be a good thing. And as we've said before, each percentage point that we save is right around $780,000. So before I get into the contributions, if you guys remembered, last time we made changes to the copay plan, the deductible plan. We discussed moving from an HRA to an HSA, a health savings account. We were able to vote those things in. We also talked about going to a Local Plus network with Cigna as an option. We were able to vote that in. Another thing to note there that I did talk to Paul earlier, one question that came out of that was if MMC was going to be included in the Local Plus. We have got confirmation that they will be in the network, so I know that was a big win for all of us. I think last time we talked, about 85% of our claims were already going through the Local Plus network. But with MMC being included, that'll be even better. So we are only assuming in our projections 25% of the population selecting the smaller network. I'll be curious your feedback today when we see the contributions that we're going to be talking about. But with the MMC addition, we think that number could go up, but we're still kind of keeping that at 25 at this point. Still thinking that's pretty aggressive in the first year. Any questions about those plans? So I know we've had a few weeks now to sleep on it, think about it, talk to our team members, but any questions does anybody have since the last meeting about the plan designs, about moving to the HRA, to the HSA from the HRA before we start talking about cost? I wanted to at least pause and allow for any questions anybody had. I know we had a ton last time, but any other questions, comments, thoughts before we go to the next stage?
I have a question. This is Mary.
Okay.
Hey, Mary.
All right, and y'all tell me to either wait, we'll come back to it or whatever. I know at one point in time the teachers were looking at the state plan. I sure hate to make these changes if the teachers are leaving. Do we know where we're at on the status of the teachers looking at the state plan?
Mr. Bodery?
I can say that the board looked at this, and the school board looked at this, and they're staying with this plan this coming January. That's what they spoke about doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up to that one, and then I have a new question.
Yes, Ms. Allen.
Doug, is that going to be a year-to-year decision? The way you answered it made it sound like you're making that decision for this year, but is this going to be a year-to-year decision for y'all?
They are looking at further analyzing the plan and look at the comparability between that. But of course, that's by state statute. The school board's required to analyze that annually.
Okay, so I guess my only request in that is just to make sure that risk management stays in that conversation as well, because we do need to know the impact of that decision if it changes. And then my question was, I know one of the big changes in this smaller network is that we're losing Stonecrest. So is there any conversation or is there any opportunity for Stonecrest to participate in a meaningful way to be able to join the network? Can they do that on their own? Are they bound by other contracts? Is that even anything that's an option?
Yeah, it is. And so we're still going to offer the broader network, which includes all the hospitals, all the systems, so that if you don't want to make any changes, there would be a slight increase. You could keep the network that you have today that does include Stonecrest.
So that being said, that the employee who lives in Smyrna can still go, and if they want to pay a higher price, right, they can still go to Stonecrest, right?
That's right, right. And we'll show those rates here in a second. The benefit would be if you want to go to the smaller one, which would now exclude Stonecrest, the rates are actually going to be less than you're paying today. But that's the decision each person has to make. But that is still an option.
I just know that with us being basically self-funded, that if, Stonecrest wanted to cut a separate deal with us so that they don't lose out on this, I just want to make sure that we're having that conversation with them if they have an opportunity to do that, because I don't want if it's a slight increase, let's just roll with the system we have in place. If it's a meaningful increase for those folks to be able to stay with that provider, then I think we need to look at having direct one-on-one conversations with them.
Yep, and we'll look at the rates and let me know what you think about that. But essentially, it's the Cigna network. I mean, we're not contracting at this point. It's all of Cigna members have those two network options. But when we look at the contributions, I don't think it's significant, but I'll be curious the committee's opinion when we look at that. So let me know here in just a second when we get to that. Any other? Yeah, Lisa.
And this might not be the time to ask, but I do have questions going from the HRA to the HSA model.
Sure.
Now, okay, so how do we transition from people who end the year with funds left in that? I mean, do we run dual for a while, HRA and the HSA as because you can roll $500 in your HRA to the next year, or does it end?
We're working through those details at the moment, but in theory, it will end. So, I mean, we'll put all this in the communications to the employees, but in our mind, the HRA funds will end December 31st, and then we will move to the HSA, and then we will start depositing funds into each employee that elects the HSA plan on a per deduction basis, and they would not have access to the rollover.
There would be no rollover, so we really need to have communications as soon as we make these decisions to employees you've got 6 months or whatever, however many months to spend. Yeah.
Yeah.
To make sure you...
One of the questions that were asked last time, or I'm glad you brought this up, was how much money do employees have in their HRA funds today? And I mean, honestly, it's a fair amount of money. We don't know exactly, but what we do know is that I think we looked it up, only 18% of employees in a given year meet their deductible and only 12% meet their out-of-pocket. So because it's really employer monies, we know the only way you could use those dollars is meeting your deductible, out-of-pocket, some co-pays. So there are a lot of funds there. Flip side, they're not able to take it with them. They're not able to use it for dental and vision, all the benefits we talked about the HSA. So that will be that transition period as far as explaining those things.
So typically with the HRA, we've had y'all bring to the table various vendors that account for those funds. We've had several over the years. Is that the same model with the HSA, or do we know who is going to manage the HSA funds today?
The difference, I don't know if we've made final decisions. Melissa, have we decided for sure who we're going to use for the HSA? I know we're looking at 2 or 3 options. I don't know if we've made a final yet.
That is something that we are working through with Cigna.
But the way the HSA, regardless of who we select, it's more picking the one that's the best fit for the county and for the school board. But the way that it would work is each person's going to have a debit card, just like your debit card today, and then you would swipe that at a doctor's office, pharmacy, and you can only use the funds that the county or the school board has deposited in that account. So if you only have $25 in there, even though we may give you $500 over the course of the year, you can only use the funds that are on there, but it's different than the HRA. You're going to have a card that you would swipe.
If I'm correct, it's closer to the FSA, the way it's implemented.
Mm-hmm. Right. True.
I would just ask if y'all would include Mark in y'all's discussion, please.
And we are. I think we are.
We have.
He's involved. We're pretty much taking his recommendation, I believe.
Other questions? Continue.
All right, one other thing that I wanted to mention. Obviously, we mentioned MMC is going to be in the network by the time this rolls out. As we're continuing to uncover other things that we're trying to think through for the county, the school board, as it relates to the HSA, another thing we wanted to bring up before we get into the rates is because you do have the on-site clinic, and they do largely preventive services, but some non-preventive services. When you're in a high deductible with an HSA plan, the IRS regulates that you can't have services at no cost that aren't preventive. So as long as they're preventive in nature, then you can have it at no cost. If it's a sick visit, say for example, there needs to be a cost associated with that, or you could lose your benefits of being in an HSA account. So we're in the process of now working with Cigna and St. Thomas to determine what codes are used by the county going to the clinic that would be considered non-preventive. And just like anything with the IRS, it's pretty vague in what that is and how much you can charge. But we wanted to be up and up in this meeting, because this may be the last time we were able to talk about it. As we're going through this, we're trying to determine what are those services and then what would be a price to charge for those. And we'll make sure it's in all the communications, but that's going to be another thing to consider when you're thinking about the HSA. So more to come there, but just wanted to be fully transparent that as we continue to uncover things, we want to bring it to this committee for either questions or thoughts.
Okay, this is Mary again.
Hey, Mary.
So if by chance, of course I don't have the HSA, but I have several folks here and family members that would be swapping to the HSA if that's what they chose. So basically what you're saying is they can go to the on-site clinics for preventative measures and they're not going to get charged just like we always have it set up. But if they go and they've got strep throat, it's going to cost them something. So now we've shot ourselves in the foot of having a free clinic. I mean, everybody realizes it's in their premium, so nothing's really free. But a free clinic as for they're no longer able to walk in and get service and medicine and leave for strep throat if they swap to this HSA?
That is true, and it's an IRS regulation, so it's not a county or even Cigna. They can use their HSA money, so I mean they'll be able. We're depositing funds into their account that they could use for that. But I think the key is what you said is it's not free. I mean, it's paid somewhere. I know they're not going to see it that way, but it is coming out of their premiums. But that is something that we're going to continue to work through. What is the cost? What are those services? But even for diabetic supplies, heart medication, cholesterol, I mean, people go in for a lot of chronic conditions. All those things are considered preventive. So it would be that small subset of true sick type visits.
So basically, we could take a person that swaps to the HSA and hit them twice for having the availability of going to a free clinic, because we've hit them just like everybody else in their premium cost, like it comes out of everybody's. But now we're going to take some of their money that they've been taking out of their payroll checks, putting back in this HSA. So we've hit them twice. We will hit that small population twice for the price of having a free clinic.
But they're getting a tax deduction also, right?
Well, that money's going to be coming out pre-tax from their payroll.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What I will say, when we get into the rates, we are suggesting that if you stay in the HSA plan, even in the broad network, it is a rate decrease. And if you go to the skinnier network, it's even more of a decrease. So not that helps, but it isn't an increase.
Lisa, you got a question on that?
No, just a history lesson. Where'd Mary go?
Mary.
No, I'm
still here.
There you go. I just like looking at you. Do you remember when we first started the HRA? Because we had the deduction so low, and the question came up about using the clinics, we were charging them a fee. The ones who are HRA, we were charging them a fee if they used the on-site clinics in the beginning. I mean,
I understand that, but now supposedly we've got them up to their premium cost of kind of paying for their plan, like we've got the deductible plan folks and the copay plan people. We are now gotten everybody closer to actually paying our premiums for basically our services. In other words, I could see and understand if HSA, HRA was all still the lower dollar amount, but over these last couple of years, we've actually, if you will, started making them pay a little more for their actual service. They're paying more and more of their part of the premium now than riding on the other two policy or plans backs on that. So, I mean, I get it, and yes, I understand we did, and I understand that it's going to be a small window that they would have to pay for, because if you said diabetes and high blood pressure is preventative, I get that, and it goes back to, like you said, we got to really make sure people understand. I just really want it to know out there that some of them are going to be hit twice when, you're taking your young kid, not an infant, but your young kid for a strep throat instead of waiting at your doctor or whatever, if you can get in and out real quick at our new clinics there.
I think that you just got to rethink about what those clinics are for. It's like, as you said, it's preventative. It covers it. You could just go pick your appointment. But if it is you're sick, as if you were going to another doctor because you are sick, you're going to be charged there as well, right? If I go to a doctor's office versus this, it's just that this is the clinic that you want to go to for preventative.
Right. I mean, and like I said, we're not a big fan of this either, so I'm not going to sit here and make light of it for either one of you. I mean, it's an IRS rule that we wanted to bring to your attention. We weren't glad to see that either. So I don't want to dismiss it, Mary, but it's something we are going to have to address. And because it's a gray area, we're going to try to limit the services as much as we can. And then we can also work on the cost, because it says fair market value is the definition. So you have to charge fair market value, which is also gray. So more to come there, but we just want to be, like I said, fully transparent.
For decades, Rutherford County has always been known for having very rich benefits, and that's why people wanted to come to work here. And unfortunately, as this segment of the market, prices have gone up, healthcare has become more expensive. And we're not the only ones. We're having, in order just to try to control cost, we're having to offer more narrow networks, higher deductibles. Every employee is having to pay a larger piece of the pie to have more skin in the game, if you will. And it's not just us. I mean, it's every Fortune 500 company, State Farm, Coca-Cola, it doesn't matter. Everybody's paying more money than what we paid 5 years ago. Paul, you have any comments you want to add to that?
No, I'll share anything you want. What Jay has said is accurate. I can add to it.
Okay, nothing extra. Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just have one thought I wanted to add.
Yes.
I know with the IRS, a lot of times it is however you can creatively explain your answer. And so I'm thinking we already have a certain amount of overhead, certain amount of cost built in. They gave the report, I think this month it was $21 per member per month is what that costs. So there's a cost with that. So, and they're already paying through their premiums for that. So I'm thinking if a $25 copay and we can deduct $21, then they're paying $5. I think we can get there. I mean, I think we can get to a reasonable number that we can defend and keep that cost low and still offer those services there.
Agree.
The only other thing that I'd like to say on this is we most definitely need this spelled out, black and white, plain and simple. We don't need to get a lot of big words, and I'm saying this for myself because don't totally understand the HSA. But if we're going to do this, we need to do this and make it very plain and just blatantly say, if you go to the clinics, which is great, but here this is what it might cost you. We just need to make sure that we really, when we do this, because I have several folks here, and like I said, family own it, that we need to make sure everybody understands what's fixing to happen.
I agree. It's an educational process, and I'm sure Mr. Elam and his department, along with help from Mercer and Cigna, will do everything within their power to do that. Thank you, Mary.
Yes, sir. I have additional money that's coming to the Budget Committee for overtime for part of this. And it'll be spelled out to the Budget Committee, but you can't have this savings and not have additional costs from administrative costs.
Just for his small department to try to pull together everything to try to help educate all of our employees.
I will say it's a big lift. It's a very, very big lift for this department to be able to get all the educational pieces out. I've been in meetings and more meetings and more meetings. I've even met with the CEO of Stonecrest in trying to get a better understanding. The one thing I will say as we move forward with this, even met with the Board of Education, met with Chairman Young, is that when we look at the differences here, when we look at the changes here, the biggest thing that I want everybody to understand is that this is a big swing, but it gives the employee choices. It gives them, if you want to go to the Local Plus, network, you can. If you don't want to, then you can still use the doctors that you're using. If you don't like a copay at the clinics, you can move to or stay in the copay plan if you'd like to. I mean, it's not like, the only thing here, one of the things to decide today is if no one goes in to annual enrollment, I mean, if someone does not go into annual enrollment, what do you do with them if they're in the HRA plan and it ends in December? Do you roll them into the HSA? And if you do, which is the HSA is more like the HRA plan, again, what do you do? Do you move them into the copay plan, which is different than, I mean, there's some difference, but the thing that we have is, in talking to different people, is that you have a very young population that they don't want to pay the high premiums. They want to be able to save their money. So this is a mechanism for them to be able to save their money, and then when they wanted to, several years, they may have their entire deductible, maximum out of pocket. I mean, they may have it all saved up, which is great. But it allows them to have more choices. And this is one of the things we have been looking at for a long time. We dove into the state plan. We, looked at it, is to let people have greater choices than what we've had in the past. And that's why you see the different plans. And then within those plans, hopefully, if it's approved today, you will see different networks. And then that's their choice. I want to keep my doctor. I'm not going into the local plus because a doctor at HCA is not in that plan. It could be a heart doctor at Centennial or something. Is not in that plan, so I'm going to stay in this plan, but not the local plus. But if all your doctors are St. Thomas, Vanderbilt, whoever is in the local plus network, then you can go into that network and you can realize that savings based on the doctors you have, or you may change doctors just for the savings. But that's what today the biggest thing is allow people to have better control of their health care and the changes that they want to make based on what their needs are, medication, everything else.
Okay, so Ed, this is Mary. So are we at the point in this discussion that we could address if an employee doesn't go in during open enrollment, what they roll to?
Yes, you can make that choice, yes. I mean, a decision has to be made. If you're going to, and I think the recommendation, Jay, is to end the HRA plan at the end of the 2021 year, this year, and then it's got to be decided, do you roll them over to the HRA plan, or do you roll them over to the copay plan if they decide not to go in and make any changes, and there will be some.
So the first decision we need to make today is to whether to swap from an HRA to an HSA.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what the recommendation was last month, so that's where we've moved to the HSA.
Yeah, I thought we did make that move last month, to move to the HSA, right?
Yes.
That was in the minutes.
That's what I kind of thought, but I was like, well, let's make sure. So let's get one item off the table and address, if you don't go into open enrollment and if you don't go into open enrollment, if your copay or a deductible plan, that's where you stay. If you are in the HRA and do not go into open enrollment, I think because of the money amount that could possibly burden someone when they think there's money that's not really theirs out there in the account like it used to be in the HRA, I really think that they should be rolled into the copay plan so that they're not shocked when they have such amount of money that potentially is coming out of their payroll checks that they're not used to.
I would personally probably disagree, just because when you look at the rate sheet, I know we haven't gotten to the rate sheet yet, but for an employee in the HSA, it's going to be, we're going to round it probably to $25, but it's $25.21 is what we're proposing, which is 25 cents less than they're paying today. If you look up under the copay, they're going to pay $50 more. So just for a single, they would be paying $74. For a family, it goes from...
Exactly, but they're used to us having put, I don't know the exact, like $750 in an account, whereas now they're not using our county money of $750. They got to come up with their money in their account.
We're going to give them $500. We're going to give them $500 and $1,000 instead of $750, $1,500. So we're still going to give them $500 or $1,000 depending on the tier.
This is Lois Miller. I'd like to make a comment. First of all, Jay, aren't we going to put that money in slowly over the year?
Yes.
And then secondly, though, back to Mary's concern that we would roll someone into the copay plan when they were already in the HRA plan, I think if we communicate appropriately and explain, get the word out to everybody that you really do need to go in and make your choice. Because if we roll people into the copay plan when they were in the HRA plan, we're going against what we were trying to achieve by offering the HSA plan. We had to find a way to control costs, not just for the employee, but for the county and for the school board. And if we put them in the copay plan, we're putting them into a more expensive plan for all of the above, for the employee, for the county, and for the school board. So I would think that we would want to roll all HRA participants at a minimum that don't go in and make a choice into the HSA plan, and possibly even those that are enrolled in the copay and deductible plan into the HSA plan if they don't make a choice, as long as we educate them that that is going to be the outcome.
I mean, the biggest concern I would have, I'm indifferent what you decide to auto-enroll. Just typically when we auto-enroll like that, Mary, if we moved everybody in the HSA and said, if you don't do anything, you're going to go to the copay plan, that plan, kind of as Lois says, does cost more. I'm assuming in our projection right now that everybody in the HRA would go to the HSA. If we're going to auto-enroll them into the copay, there's going to be a larger percentage of people that would stay in the copay just because I don't have to go in and do anything. I would have to go back and do the projection over, and it would go up. Because, I mean, it costs, as Lois said, it costs more to be in the copay plan. I would have to change some of the enrollment assumptions, and it would make the increase to the overall plan be more.
Anybody have other questions for Jay? Are you at that point to go into the rates, or you still want to explain more?
Yeah, okay, I'd like to go into the rates. Let's look at the rates and see it, and then you can
Without objection, we'll move into the rates, Jay. Go ahead.
So we look at the rates. What we have pulled up now, I've got a couple different things, but you can kind of see when you look at the rates, as I said, the enrollment assumptions are key because if we do anything different with that, we'd have to change the assumptions. But you can see the gross rates for each plan, the total rates for 2022. I mean, it's $820 for the copay plan, $1,352 for the deductible, and $499 for the HSA. So I think that's kind of where we're saying it's pretty dramatically different to the county versus where the employees are, just because overall the employees are paying anywhere from 5% of the cost to 20% of the cost. The thing you could kind of look, and I know most of the time on these when we start looking at it, we focus more on where the employee changes are. So you can see the increase to the employee contribution about halfway on this page. So what we were saying before, it's pretty, I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, the increase to the employee, if we looked at the bottom, which don't scroll down yet, but it's like 2.5% increase, overall increase to the employees. So if I looked at all the rates for an employee, it's about 2.5. For the employers, about 3.6. We wouldn't necessarily share that number because it varies by tier, but you can see by dollar all the way down, depending on what tier you're in, depending on what plan you're in. There are slight increases to the copay in the deductible and slight decreases to the HSA. And this is for the large network, so this is not the smaller network. Let's just quickly, for you maybe have any questions, scroll over to the right side, David. Over here, you could see if you do end up deciding to go into the smaller network, the cost to you, the employee local plus contribution is kind of down there, $65, $243, $14.98. And then what we did is showed you next to that what your annual savings would be. So, for example, in the HSA, instead of paying, I think it was $25, you'd only pay, $15. Over the course of the year, that's $120 savings. As much as, almost $1,000 savings if you're in the deductible plan for family. So, just as much as we need to educate about the HSA, we also want to make sure they understand, who's in the network, how do you determine who's in the network, all those things, because I do get concerned that we're going to get back to prices in the HSA where we were a long time ago. I mean, for $15, I can be in this network, single HSA, but we want to make sure they understand those differences. But I'm kind of excited to put this in the guide as well. I mean, there's not too many years we've been able to say the rates are going down. So that's a positive for what I feel to be for many members in the county, not that much of a difference in the network when 85% of them are already using these doctors anyway. So, a fair amount of them will decide to move in this direction. And in every instance, these rates are less than they're paying today. So
are we not going to see a wellness reduction in the rates for the Local Plus network?
Yes. We just didn't include that on this slide. But yeah, it would be the same. I think it's $25. Is that what it is? We would give them the same. Mainly, we were just trying to show over here the difference in the two networks, but they would still get the wellness credit. Good call out.
So potentially an HSA employee only on the Local Plus network would be back to paying zero?
I don't know. Go back. That's why I was thinking the same. Go back on the other side. Is the $25 with or without the wellness today?
25 is with the wellness. Because it's almost $50 now.
So Jake, I don't know, Jake or David, that's a good question. But I mean, with wellness, it's 25. I'm thinking with wellness. These are the with wellness rates that we're showing on the Local Plus too. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yep. So those are the wellness rates, Mary.
Okay, so they've already backed the 25 out of on that line item or on that column. That 25's already backed out.
Yeah, because if you look back on, I wish we had the wellness reduction. Without wellness reduction, it's $49.96 and then $24.96. We're basing the reduction just to show it in this meeting off that with wellness rate.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's a good question. I didn't know that answer either.
Jay,
Ed?
these rates do not include, if you go with the HSA, they do not include the contribution by the county. Correct?
What do you? The contribute.
With the
These
county's
rates
contribution.
do. The HSA, it does. It does include the
$1,000 or whatever's decided on.
That.
It's included in this rate. Okay.
Yep. It is included. And we can look at this. I know school board members are on as well. We have the school board rates that are, divided by 10 instead of 12. But other than that, the same differences apply for those rates as well. I know there's a lot of numbers on here, but I don't know. Any other questions from anyone else? I could go on and on, but I want to make sure you guys answer any questions you have. As far
Other
as
questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On the page with the Board of Education rates, on the renewal rates.
That's Doug Bodery speaking for the.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Yeah, it's Doug Bodery. BOEs. The page with the BOE rates, where it shows the Local Plus network next to, where it says Board of Education 10 months. Next to it, under the Local Plus network, it says County General 12 months. Is that supposed to be Board of Ed 10 months on the rates?
Yes. My apologies. Yes. Right here.
Yes, sir. Yes, right there. So those are the 10 months. It appeared to be. I just wanted to clarify.
Sure. Good question. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Howe.
I don't know if Mercer or Cigna or anybody has this kind of a tool, but I recently had a conversation with someone who was looking at a home mortgage rate. And so they were able to plug into a calculator what they wanted their down payment to be, you know, all the different variables to figure out what was the best option for them. And I'm just curious if there is such a tool, if we could utilize it. If there's not, could we create one so that not only could the employees use it to figure out what was my cost last year, you know, what do I want to pay premiums, and then help them back into what that choice is. So not only could they use it, but also the staff could use it when they're making recommendations to folks.
Right.
So
And Cigna offers that. We do that.
tool
We
does
do that
currently
every year
exist?
already, but that'll help. It uses their claims from the previous year
Right.
and helps them decide of the plans which is the best option for them.
And so they know how to get to that. Employees
It's
know
in
how
the guide, in the benefit
Okay.
guide, and I think these guys do use it quite often.
We do, and actually the person at Cigna that works on that with us is in the room, Lee Smith. She helps head that up every year. We make sure that our deductibles are plugged in and co-insurances and all of that, so the employees have access to do that. Most time, if I'm not mistaken, Lee, it's used mostly during annual enrollment, but it is available to new hire employees also.
It's My Cigna app, is correct? Easy Choice tool.
Easy Choice tool, plan
Off
comparison.
your My Cigna app.
I'm not sure that everybody zooming in heard that. She's saying it's a separate link and it's not on My Cigna page?
It's in the enrollment guide that we give to new hires and that are mailed out to employees.
So all employees will have access to that tool?
Right, so even those that haven't enrolled in a plan yet will have access, and if they're not enrolled in a plan, they wouldn't have access to the app, to the Cigna, My Cigna app, unless they're enrolled in a plan already. So this comparison tool is set up so any employee that's looking at a plan can use that comparison tool first. Correctly? Yes, we will. Yes, we are still in the process of working through with our new benefit system to embed some links into that platform. So if an employee gets to the medical plans and they want a little more information about that, they can link out to another tab and pull that site up.
So following that opportunity then, I'm curious, could we look at, because you were talking about possibly the impact of the default plan, whatever the default plan is, could we look at our member population that we're looking at moving out of the HSA or HRA and figure out what would be the best plan for those folks so that we can figure out what the default plan needs to be? That was really what started my thinking, was how do we know what the default plan needs to be? So is that anything that would help us determine that, or do you think we just need to let price drive it? What are you thinking?
I mean, I personally feel that, yes, we are making changes to the plan, I agree, but when you really sit down at the kitchen table and you do the math, the HSA, if it made sense to be in the HRA, it's going to make sense to be in the HSA. You may not like the changes we're making, but due to the cost of the copay plan and that we're not giving you money in your account, it's going to still be the same decision for most people, I think.
And we've only had this happen actually one time in the past since I've been here in over 10 years where we did away completely with the plan. The first time out, we completely we migrated the employees to the plan that mimicked the one we were doing away with the closest. And we did have to have a active enrollment one year where if you didn't go in and enroll, you didn't have benefits. And I think there's still some on the committee that would say they asked us never to do that again. So we definitely do not want to do that.
Other questions for Jay?
I mean, a question that I would maybe ask, I think the answer, but the same thing, would we default them to the broader network or the smaller network? I mean, that would be another question to ask. That I think the answer is we would do it to the broader network, but I mean, that would be another default question we have to decide on at some point.
I would say to the broader network, but also that's part of our educational process because they need to know the difference. But there is another option, as Mr. Edom was talking about, a choice, different choice.
So before we make a motion, the things I haven't covered is the dental and the vision rate passes, no increases to anything there. It's further down. Retiree rates are staying the same for post 65, no changes there, but that's part of the motion as well. Want to make sure we cover.
So Jay, it's, I guess in the real small print down here, these numbers are small. I need a magnifying glass, but it looks like employee increase is 2.5%.
Right.
And employer increase is 3.8%.
Correct.
Am I correct? Ms. Nolan?
The 2.5 is overall, right?
It's overall.
Overall.
Look, David, can you scroll down to the bottom of where it has those green that I'm looking at my computer? But overall, it's 3.6.
Right.
But just because of the way the contribution splits are by the two plans and the different tiers, if we apply these numbers and we multiply all the rates in the enrollment, it ends up being a 3.8 to the employer and a 2.5 to the employee.
But I think what employees need to hear, it's a 10% if you're on the copay plan.
Yeah, I don't think we share that 2 point, because it really depends on where you are as to
Right.
what, I don't even know we give anybody a percentage.
I'm just
Yeah.
thinking about when we are doing minutes and how we present, and if what people hear is, oh, it's only 2.8, not realizing they're not seeing what we're seeing. It is a 10% for the copay plan, a 7% increase for the deductible plan, and a very slight decrease if you're on the HRA going to HSA.
Mm-hmm. Right. Those
The
would
whole
be.
net of all of that is the 2.8.
That's great. Let's spend a little bit of time, members, especially for those who are zooming in. I can't see everybody's facial expressions, but I want everybody to clearly understand this. This is a big lift. It's a big change in what we've had in the past. I want everybody to feel comfortable before we make a motion, give you that opportunity to ask any questions before the motion comes, that we send a positive recommendation to the commission for adoption. Any further questions for Jay?
Of course, it's Mary, and you know I got a question.
That's all right. You got them written down. I knew that.
Okay, so one of the sheets that was provided in our SharePoints for today is the plan design change. So these rates that you are presented, Jay, are based on the deductible increases, the out-of-pocket increases also, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the needed increase was even higher than these things, but with the plan change adjustments, we were able to get to that. I think it was 10.7 minus 1. It would have been more than that. I believe in general, the copay and the deductible plan, the plan changes are worth about 2.2%, something like that, and that is in these rates.
Say that again in the mic. Got members that are zooming. Yeah.
I'm questioning chicken or egg. Should you approve the plan design first and then rates? Because the rates are predicated on approving the plan designs, as Mary was saying.
I think what we were saying earlier is we approved the plan design changes and the HSA changes in the local plus last month. And so we don't want to vote on that again if we don't have to. It sounds like, but yeah, so this one really is the employer contribution to the HSA. That was something we held. So moving to the $500,000 for the HSA, and then essentially all the rates on these grids.
I want to, yes, Chairman Allen.
So a few years ago, we made the decision to do a blended rate. We were seeing higher utilization and the higher cost in the retirees, and it was going to give a disproportionate increase to them. So are you still examining that on an ongoing basis to see where our utilization is and ways to cut utilization or advise to cut utilization?
Yeah, so 2 points to that. One, the post-65 retiree rates always helps subsidize the rest of the group. And so we've used that subsidy to help lower the active rates. And then really, we didn't want to muddy the water, but in the nature of continuing to try to be more proactive and looking at the state plan, for example, and looking for ways, essentially for Doug and his team, we want to look at the state plan and our plan and pick out the best of all those things so that we don't have to worry about what the school board's going to do next year. I mean, as long as we're making the right decisions and our increases are lower, we'll all be happy. The next thing that we wanted to cover after this is, one, we got a ton of work with Ed and his team on communications, videos, posters, all that. But the next big topic we wanted to coordinate with Cigna and start talking about the retiree plan. And what are some of the other options we have, some other financial vehicles, some other plan designs for the retirees. But that's really the next big topic we want to cover. Not that we have to make we're not planning on making a decision for this year, but start that education process.
Okay, other questions for Jay?
I have one question. Doug Bodery.
Doug Bodery, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. There'd been a little bit of discussion on this in the past, on when we began speaking about, transferring over to an HSA. One thing I know is like the city of Murfreesboro school system does this with their employees that are under their HSA. They actually provide a contribution to that health savings account for their employees. I believe it's like a $50 a month contribution. And I remember this being brought up before. Has there been any more discussion on the possibility of, with some of the savings, funding or pre-funding before January, those health savings allowance for the employees that are going to this?
Ed?
I think our discussion, Jay, and with the ad hoc committee was to just, once the HRA ended, they started with a zero balance.
Right.
And then what we had talked about from an administrative standpoint is to make sure that the contributions from the county would be the same as their deductible plan. So if they're on 10 months, they're on 12 months, it would be same as their deductible plan instead of front-loading the entire 500, 1,000 on the front end.
On their deduction schedule.
Yeah, on the deduction schedule.
I did have that discussion with Mark Tucker the other day when we actually reached out to Town of Smyrna to find out, because they use Local Gov, which is the payroll system, and they have Cigna, because we wanted to kind of get a preamble of how we're going to make this work and how we're going to get it set up and how the funding is going to work and what is the best thing for us to do. Can we try to front load some of it, to help? Or do we just divide it up on their deduction schedule? And what we kind of came up with is, first of all, our benefit system would not handle that pre-funding because it still has to track it. And Mark didn't feel like that we probably had that option in Local Gov either. So we were thinking probably the best route, because we have employees that come in after the first of the year, and all of that's got to be tracked too, because obviously if they come in January, or they're not there January, they come in February, March, April, they're not going to get the full 500 or 1,000. It's going to, I hate to say prorated, but that's basically what it's going to be based on what's left of their deduction cycle. So we felt like probably just from an administrative standpoint and the systems that we have and the differences in the pay cycles, that we're best to stick to the deduction cycle to make it all work in all systems.
All right, let me run down this list and let everybody, this is what I'm looking for, is to go into as we craft the motion, but let me go down this list, which will be the motion, the things that I'm going to talk about, and we'll discuss this after I read it, that will go as a favorable recommendation to the commission. So the 21-22 medical insurance recommendations are to eliminate the HRA medical plan at year end of this year, 2021, to implement a high deductible / HSA plan January 1st of 2022, There'll be a 1% rate increase. A negative 1% rate increase compared to an HRA. The employer contribution, $500 for single, $1,000 for families. Employer contribution distribution applied according to their deduction schedule. Employee/family coinsurance will be 20%. There'll be a 7% rate increase for the deductible plan. There'll be a 10% rate increase for the co-pay plan. Implement Local Plus network in all 3 plans. Increased deductibles exhibited in the proposed plan design. No increase to the Freedom Plan stipend for retirees. No increase for the post-65 retiree medical plans. Rate pass to dental plan and rate pass to vision plan. Now,
and Mayor Ketchum, if I could add one thing to that we default the HRA plan to the HSA plan, broader network.
Broader network, okay. So I'll be happy to read those again, cover them. I want to open it up for questions. At this point, I want everybody on this committee feeling comfortable, especially my 2 commissioners, Speaker Pro Tem Phillips and Chairman Allen, because you're the representatives on this committee on behalf of the commission, and when it comes before them, you'll need to feel comfortable to answer any questions. Of course, we'll have everybody here to answer those questions as well, but I want you to, let's totally vet this before over the next few weeks, but I want you to feel comfortable today as we pass this motion. Again, it's a 2.5% increase on employee increase, and employer increase is 3.8% overall.
Chairman Ketchum, this is Mary.
Yeah, Lisa likes the overall part. Correct. Okay, Mary, yes ma'am.
Okay, for the sake of making everything simple, because that was a huge, what you would like to include in the motion, if the committee would allow, let's make the motion to accept the dental and the vision as presented with no premium increase. Let's go ahead and do that, and then make another motion on the medical, if that would be okay. Let's get the dental and vision out on its own, since both of them are passed through. They don't cost the county anything. It's the employee-only cost. So I'll make a motion to accept the dental and vision premiums as presented that are a pass-through cost with no contributions from Rutherford County.
Members, you've heard the motion. Second. And we have a second? Who was the second?
Jerry Crowell.
Now discussion on the motion. Would you like the motion reread? No? Any further questions? Call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony.
Yes.
Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown. Amber Brown. Shay Crowell.
Yes.
Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Discussion. Floor is open for the next motion. Mary?
Actually, it is me again. I like making these things simple. I realize we got a lot of motions, but let's address the enrollment issue. Let's make the motion to the employee, if they do not go in during open enrollment, that they are enrolled in the same plan with the larger network, with the exception of the HSA, the HRA, and the HSA going from one to the other. That way we've got the implementation taken care of. That everybody, if you don't go in, you stay where you're at, but you go to the larger network. And if you're in the HRA, you automatically will go to the HSA, still in the larger network.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Floor is open for discussion. Good, bad, or indifferent? Any questions? Seeing none, call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony.
Yes.
Doug Bodery.
Yes.
Amber Brown. Amber Brown. Shay Crowell.
Yes.
Holly Deering.
Yes.
Alan Farley.
Yes.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
Motion passes. All right, floor is now open for further discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I want to spend a minute talking about how we're going to fund the HSA. I'm a little concerned about people losing that money that they've got saved up. I know there's some administrative issues with preloading any of it, but is there some way for us to get them a little more money a little faster, especially for those who are losing a lot of that money that they've not used? I'm just concerned about that.
I know it's a concern, but
Right.
Jay, where do you get the money from?
We're able to
You can do whatever you want to do, but where are you going to get the money from? What bucket you're going to take it out of? I guess that's what it comes down to.
The issue essentially, I think what we've talked about is if we give them 3 months in advance or 6 months in advance, based on turnover, if they leave, they take the money with them. There's, unlike the HRA, if they leave and there's money in their accounts, they lose the money. It's the opposite. If we give them 6 months up front and they leave, we lose the money. And I think that's the big concern.
And because of the turnover, then you would have to, the person that was hired, in place of them, you would have to put another amount in there for them if you front load it.
Based on our turnover, just in education, we have a large amount of turnover. It could be 400 or 500 easy, right? And we'll bring in 400 or 500 or 600. Probably.
Yeah, with new school and everything, it's you're going to lose some, then you're going to gain even more than that.
And I'm never one to complicate things. I really am always in favor of whatever the simplest solution is. It's usually the most obvious one. But I wonder, is there not some opportunity to, and I don't know if this allows us to even do this if we're not treating people equitably, but I think about it almost like a vesting. Is there some way to look at an employee from a vesting standpoint and say, you've been here for 5 years, 7 years, whatever that number is, you get X. I don't know. Again, I don't know if that's fair or right or wrong, but I'm just trying to think through the concern of, these people losing money that they've saved up, especially the ones who are, the long-term employees that aren't, we're at risk of losing anybody anytime. And so I know what the logic is, and I don't argue with the logic. I'm just trying to look out for the employee and knowing this is a big change for a lot of them, and in their minds, they're losing out on money that they might not have ever even used. It's a theoretical bucket of money, but they're losing it in their mind. So I'm trying to think of some way to address that concern.
I know, it's, where do we get the money from? Sonia, Ms. Stevenson, are you still on? Are you on mute?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, okay, so you and your department have recently started doing exit interviews, and can you share with the committee what you're seeing, or do you think that this is a big deal about what are some of the things that you're seeing? Is it they're leaving us because of they're overworked, they're leaving us because they're underpaid, they're leaving us from what you've shared with me, it's not really the benefits. You know, they like our benefits.
Right, our benefits are good as far as our pension and having the insurance, those type things. But one of the things that we do hear from people who are not leaving is that if our pay increases and our salaries do not continue to stay in line with the type of benefits we receive, that's an area of concern for somebody who may have been here longer. People who have been here less than 5, 7, 9 years that leaves, they're leaving for other reasons. People that have been here longer are looking at, is my compensation in line with what I will need long-term for retirement and how that lines up with our benefits. But for some of our people who have been around longer, it's either, you know, depending on, especially like our public safety departments where they're all extremely, you know, busy, especially during COVID and everything else, you know, is the compensation matching up with the workload as compared to other entities? And that's one of the things they look at. So it's very important that if we're not going to keep the above average benefits, then we're going to have to address the pay. You know, you can't have low pay and continue to reduce benefits. So you've got to decide which side you're going to be on. If you're going to be a premium paying employer and an average benefit employer, then you know that's what you stand for. But you can't be average paying employer and average benefit employer as well, is what we're being told.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps maybe.
Mayor Ketron, I think this also goes back, and again, in many discussions prior to bringing this to the committee, was that if you don't use it, if you don't use insurance very much, then you have an option here. Go to the more local network, go to a cheaper premium, but take the higher deductible because you rarely use it. If you use it a lot, you might go into the co-pay plan, you know. So that's kind of, you know, to break this down is it's to give those people the option based on what their needs are, to give them a broader option based on what their needs are. And Jay and them have, you know, sat down and developed the plan design, you know, which is one of the exhibits. Based on that, you know, the employee assumes that risk. Maybe this year they don't use the medical plan that much, but then all of a sudden they have a reason to that they have to. Well, next year they might change to the copay plan because their medical needs have changed. So that's kind of to lay this out there. I agree with you, Commissioner Allen. We have looked at many different ways on the transfer from the HRA to the HSA, and that those balances. Paul, I think in our last meeting, wasn't it average balance is about $500?
Yeah, I think the average balance of the existing fund is 500 and the carryover was like 300, so we had to do 1,800.
Could you repeat that again?
Average balance is 500 and the average carryover is 350?
350.
Okay. Lisa?
Now, I guess when I was asking, it's really two pots of money that we're talking about this. I guess, you know, in my initial comments were those contributions that employees take out of their paycheck, and that amount is that they're used to 500 that could carry over. That's the part that I've said that I think we need the communication to say, hurry up and spend it, make sure you spend all of it. The other pot of money for those is that advanced contribution of the county toward the high deductible, deductible, right? Because we're going to pay the first whatever. But now that money is now, instead of sitting in our accounts, it's going to be sitting directly to the individual. So I guess that amount, that's our money, their money kind of set aside, is that the 500 or the 300 you were saying?
Both of those are the county money.
Well, no, not my part that I would be setting aside from my paycheck.
Going forward into the HSA?
That stops. That's the part I got to spend to make sure that I spend it all.
That's still your money that they have to spend.
Right. Lisa's. I'm thinking flexible benefits.
Yeah, the FSA.
I was going to say, I
you're
think
back
you're
to
thinking
FSA.
about
I'm at
flex
with flexible
spending.
benefits.
All those acronyms again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where my brain was, flexible benefits.
Yeah.
Roll
Flex
back.
spending.
Yeah, that pot's gone.
If it puts it into perspective, I don't know if this helps, but for a Board of Education employee, if they sign up for the HSA under family coverage, that's $100 a month that is going to be put in there for them based on their deduction schedule. If they have just employee only, it's going to be $50. For a county general employee, it's a little less because it's on a 12-month deduction cycle, which would average out to about $83, $84 a month. So I don't know if that kind of helps and puts it into perspective a little bit, that there's a little bit, up front if they want to use it, or they can save it.
Okay, this is Mary with another question.
Okay.
So Melissa, you're telling me that in January of 2022, there's going to be, let's just use BOE because it's $100. County on their premium deduction cycle is going to put $100 in their HSA. But can't the employee also put money into the HSA also?
That's correct.
That is correct, Mary. They could choose another $100.
Okay, so potentially when they go in the first month, they could have, let's just do BOE because it's $100. $100 for BOE, and then say I put $50 in there if I work for Board of Education. So technically for the first 31 days of January, I could have $150 to spend.
Pre-tax on the 150.
Yeah, it's not going to be funded until payroll, though, because everything has to process and post through payroll. And then from what I understand, what little I've been able to research, and Paul, you can correct me, then there's going to be funding that would be sent to the bank with Cigna if that's the route we go. So you can't use those funds until the account is funded. It's not like an FSA where it's pre-funded. It has to be funded first. Yeah.
Okay, so when is those deductions going to come out of my employee's payroll check? Okay, and I say that because if I'm going to go HSA, I'm going to have money come out of my check. And then when is the county? Is it going to still be the last check of the month?
Yes.
That this deduction of my personal HSA money goes to, and the county's portion?
Yes,
also,
that's correct. It has to stay on the same deduction cycle from a benefits platform standpoint. So, yes, that's correct. It works much in the payroll system, Mary, like the match does, like your the contribution the county makes for the toward the premium. It's not actually deducted from the employee's paycheck, but it's posted through the employee's paycheck, if that makes more sense. And then that's where the funding would be pulled, and Mark would do what he does on his end and send that funding to the banking. Does that
okay?
help?
So basically, everybody's going to be the first month without anything, but theoretically, I know there's dates, but come February 1st, you could have at least $100 if you were BOE, and then anything additional you have to cover.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members, I'm back. We've taken care of the dental and the vision. I'm back to the other items. listed or spoke of, I'd be happy to repeat those, but I'm looking for a motion that we can move forward. Other questions? Anybody like me to read these again?
Mr. Chairman, what's left? What's left on your list?
Okay, okay, I'll read these again because we've eliminated the last motion was it was a negative increase, decrease, it's a wash on dental and vision, okay? So we have eliminate the HRA medical plan at the end of this year, 2021. Implement a high deductible / HSA plan January 1st of 22. A negative 1% rate increase compared to the HRA. Employer contribution of $500 per single, $1,000 for families. Employer contribution. Distribution applied according to the deduction schedule. Employee and/or family coinsurance will be 20%.
That's all with the HSA plan.
Correct. A 7% rate increase for the deductible plan, a 10% rate increase for the copay plan, implement Local Plus network in all 3 plans, increase deductibles exhibited in the proposed plan design, no increase for the Freedom Plan, stipend for retirees, and no increase to the post-65 retiree medical plan. I was informed by the clerk that last month we voted on all 3. The local network plus for all 3 plans. We did vote on that and it was unanimous, correct? Or it passed. Okay.
Right, but that was not sent on to the commission. I mean, it's kind of set to the next meeting.
Yeah, so that's been passed. It would be all collective into this motion that we're sending forward.
Yes, for a recommendation.
I'll make the motion that we accept the recommendation from Mercer as presented.
We have a motion to accept the recommendation from Mercer. Is there a second? Got a second. I saw Speaker Pro Tem's lips move. He's on mute, but I read his second. Jeff is the second. Commissioner Phillips. Now, discussion. Mary, you're on mute too. I saw your lips moving. What did you say? Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Preble Acton. Yes. Rhonda Allen.
Yes.
Dr. Andrea Anthony. Dr. Andrea Anthony. Doug Bodery. Amber Brown. Shay Crowell.
Order. There was discussion still on the floor.
Holly Deering.
Alan Farley had a question on the floor for the vote.
Yes.
If you would, please, unless you're answering yes or no, please mute your...
Alan Farley had a question.
Oh, Commissioner Farley had a question?
Yes, I'm calling point of order.
We're sorry. I'll have to rule. We're in the process of calling roll. Continue.
Alan Farley.
No.
Mary Hickerson.
Yes.
Lois Miller.
Yes.
Jeff Phillips.
Yes.
Shantae Sherrill. Shantae Sherrill.
Yes.
Eric Tutobeni.
Yes.
We had 8 yes, 1 no. Motion passes. Mr. Elam,
I think that's all I got.
other business?
No, sir.
Any other discussion from members? Next meeting is when?
Question.
Everybody's looking at your calendar. This motion,
I did not vote on that last motion.
our business that we have done today will go to budget, correct, Ms. Nolan? So this will go to the Budget Committee, and as we start zeroing in on passing the budget the last week of June, the County Commission, so this will be the recommendation to this committee. Seeing no other business to come before the committee today, we'll stand in adjournment. Thank you.